So you're speaking to motion. Trustee Lamb, did you?
Yeah, a few comments, and I'm certainly going to support the motion. I think the idea of downzoning was to, if you like, free up some densities for community housing, and perhaps it would, and I think George has mentioned the extent that that might happen. I don't think it's the way to go either. I would rather see an approach where we provide incentives, perhaps better incentives than we do now, for landowners to reduce the development on their property. There are some incentives in place now. Conservation covenants do protect part of the land. Eco-gifting can avoid or reduce capital gain. And there are economic benefits, obviously, from clustering of large properties into a small area. In other words, perhaps smaller minimum lot sizes in those areas. And there's also the policy that George also mentioned of selling the densities to another property, the density transfer. And I think it'd be more effective for, certainly in my view, if we were to target those areas on the island that we want to protect, rather than trying to just simply reduce development in a kind of an ad hoc way. I think there are areas that we do want to protect, obviously ecologically sensitive areas. We do that partly now, watersheds, steep slopes, and I think that's perhaps a better way of going. We have raised, and I've been really interested in these two policies that we've had in the OCP for 10 years now. That's density transfer and community zoning. And it was on the list of things to be looked at by the focus groups. We do have some ideas from that. I want to explore those. But density transfer, which I think is an obvious tool, if we want to continue with that, to move densities from areas where we want to protect into areas perhaps that are more settled, is that we do need to make some changes. And we haven't had really much success in implementing the policy over that period of time. And I ask the question, is the value of the density is not sufficient? Is it the covenanting of the donor property? Because right now, the main purpose and more motivation behind the density transfer is to protect land that we need protecting. And as a result of that, if we do transfer densities from a property to another, to a receiving property, and that donor property has to have a covenant, a conservation covenant, so there's no further development. But maybe that is in areas that if our motivation now is more to increase the development in more settled areas, maybe the covenanting of the donor property is a restriction, or is it the lack of viable receiving properties in the more settled areas. And obviously those policies don't need to apply to larger properties. They can apply to everything. And so I agree with the motion that we direct our efforts to encourage the protection of the important areas of the land rather than downzoning. So I'm in favour of the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Are you ready to vote? All those in favour? Okay, and that carries.
The next one working through the list is the issue of house sizes. And I am going to recommend that staff remove from consideration, for further consideration, the discussion of limiting a house size to a maximum of 3,000 square feet. However, we do have in the official community plan.
Just hang on, are you making it as a motion?
Oh yes, okay.
So we
yes,
want to make sure.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so that's your motion. It's just
Second.
Okay, so could you just repeat
Yes.
it again?
I will give this to you,
Okay.
but yes, that we remove from consideration the discussion of a 3,000 square foot maximum house size.
Okay.
Now,
So moved and seconded, that's the motion. Okay, now you're speaking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to continue the discussion with respect to lot coverage. Many people, when they spoke to us over the course of the last few days, said to us that they felt that that did make some sense, that smaller lots ought to be treated differently than large lots. And let me just throw this out at you. I looked at the numbers in Malibu, for example. Many, if not most, I'm not sure that I looked at most, but many of the lots in Malibu are half an acre. With the current 1/3 lot coverage that we're allowed and a 2-story building, someone in Malibu could build a house larger than 13,000 square feet. Now, I suspect that if somebody did build a 13,000 square foot house in Malibu, that the community, the neighborhood, would not be real hot on that idea. I don't know that there is a house on Salt Spring as big as 13,000 square feet. Maybe there is one. But in any case, in a neighborhood like that, I think that's a problem. I think the neighbors would be pretty upset. On a 1/4 acre lot, you could build a 6,500 square foot house. That's pretty big on a quarter of an acre. So I would like the staff to consider further this 1/3 lot coverage that we have now, and think if that is appropriate on lots of every size. But I agree with those people who have said to us that by nailing this to a specific square footage size, it's not addressing the issue. Certainly, as many people have pointed out, a larger, more energy efficient home is better than a smaller, less energy efficient home from the standpoint of energy use, at least. Maybe not resource consumption. But in any case, I think we want to try to address this issue. I think we want to try to look at some specific neighborhoods. There are many neighborhoods in many municipalities where house sizes are limited and other places they are not. We generally live in a rural community where a lot of this may not be an issue. Also, if the province is coming in with what we expect with their so-called green building code, and if that's ready in the next 1.5 to 2 years as we anticipate, I think many of those issues as relates at least to energy consumption and efficiency will probably be addressed in that building code, and I look forward to it. So that's why I support taking the 3,000 square foot maximum size off the table, but would like still consideration of a degree of lot coverage and as it relates to different size lots on the island.
Okay, Trustee Mann?
Yeah, I just have a couple of other points. The objections or the opposition to the 3,000 square foot proposal came in large numbers, and but many of them were also, I think, sympathetic to the idea that the idea of lot coverage should be was worth looking at, and it's lot coverage which we have now, but it's a very simple. The M33 applies to pretty well all the residential lots, and so I think there is some support for us to continue to look at that ratio of lot coverage. The recommendation to address house size came from a number of focus groups, not just the housing group. The energy group did, the environment we did, I think maybe one or two others touched on it. And so I think there is some support in at least looking at it. One, particularly from the energy group, was suggesting a relationship of house size to energy efficiency. One I also think in terms of water efficiency too. And I know that many of the submissions that we got did say that the larger homes on the island are putting in those energy efficient water conservation measures. Partly because it, I guess with a larger home there's a more potential for a return, and also that the additional capital cost perhaps is incrementally not as great as it would be for a smaller home, and that's good. And I think if we are going to leave it open for further discussion, I think the possibility of somehow relating resource use, energy, water, whatever, to house size is something that might also be incorporated. The other point I want to make is that I know, George did touch on it, that in some communities the restriction on house size is applied to a particular neighbourhood. I think Oak Bay has just moved in that direction because of the particular character of an area, that limitation on square footage was applied just to a particular local area for a particular reason. And that again is something I think is worthy of discussion on the island. And so in that basis, I would certainly be prepared to move ahead on the adoption.
Okay, and just to be clear here, the numbers with respect to things such as lot coverage are in the land use law.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we're not discussing that here. This is a separate issue. But we are looking at some sort of statement about how lot development